So I've had the new iPhone 14 Pro for about 2 months now. I think the Apple event was about 2 months now. And it's been my daily driver for these past 2 months as well, ever since I got it on launch day. And today we're just going to be talking about what this phone's like, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. But we're going to mainly be focusing, pun intended, on the cameras. Before we get started, just some quick specs about the phone. On the front, you got a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display, the same size as last year's iPhone 13 Pro, but we now get up to 2000 nits of brightness in outdoors, which is really bright, and I can really tell the difference coming from an old phone. The new always-on display, or at least Apple's version of always-on display, and of course, the dynamic island. Personally, I really like the way that Apple implemented the dynamic island, at least, especially with the camera cutouts and just how seamless it worked with some of the applications that's already in the phone and third-party applications as well. The only thing I didn't like is that when you watch a video or a movie and you have the video stretched across your device, basically from one edge of the screen to the other, you kind of notice that little gap between the edge of the phone and the edge of the island. And with videos that are like 2x1 format, like this video, if you have an iPhone 14 Pro and you're watching it on your phone, you probably notice a little notch right around here or like right around this side, depending on the orientation of your phone. But other than that, internally, we get the new A16 Bionic chip, which is only available on the Pro models. Regular 14 series still got the A15 Bionic that the 13 Pros and the 13 Pro Max got last year. The battery life of this phone is great as well, especially for me coming from an iPhone 10. The difference is night and day. I can get through the entire day without ever having to worry about recharging my phone. And if I'm out hanging with my friends, I can get home by the end of the, or I can get to the end of the day with 30 or 40% of battery life sometimes. And I'm a heavy user. Like, I use my phone almost all the time. I averages about like 6 to 7 hours of screen time daily. So the battery life on this phone is incredible. And the always on display, I have it on. I've tested it with off, I've tested it with it on. It doesn't really affect the battery life that much, at least from what I can tell. I basically end with the same amount of battery life every day, and obviously with different use cases you end up with a little bit differently, but I can still get through the day without ever having to worry about the battery with the always on display or on or with it off. With all of that being said, let's focus, again, pun intended, on the camera this time. And that's honestly the part I'm mostly interested in because I'm a camera nerd. Let's start with the video first. Cinematic mode now gets a new upgrade and can record in 4K now. The 13 Pro still only able to record at 1080p. I love cinematic mode because it makes your footage look like it was recording on a professional mirrorless camera that costs like $3,000 with a lens or like $5,000 for the entire setup. I was worried at first because I thought, maybe like it might misfire or misfocus or something, but apparently you can just fix it in post-production, or even on your phone you just click edit and you can like readjust what you're focusing on because everything is done through software. So that made everything just so much easier, and all my worry with it just completely gone. And I've already posted a couple of videos recorded on cinematic mode, whether it's vlogs or just hang out with friends, and the footages, they look stunning. They're incredible. If you haven't checked them out yet, I'll link them in the description. They're going to be the first link in the description just below the like button. And another new feature that was introduced with video on the iPhone 14 Pro is action mode. I don't know if they included this on the iPhone 14. I think they did, but on the 14 Pro, they definitely have action mode, which is basically just gimbal footage. Like, you no longer need a gimbal to record footages anymore with your iPhone. When you turn action mode on, it defaults to the ultra wide camera, but it crops in at a 2.8K resolution. I think the other phones that have something similar to action modes records at 1080p. I could be wrong, I'm not entirely sure, but on the iPhone it records at 2.8K. It uses the ultra wide lens, so it may be a little bit soft, but it really gets the job done. It looks really incredible. I've tested it out a couple of times where I'm just full on sprinting and my phone's like bouncing up and down. And then when we review the footage, oh my gosh, the footage is so stabilized. It looks like it was recorded on a really nice gimbal, but in actuality, it was just a bunch of software. So I'm really glad they're able to do that, because I was honestly considering buying a gimbal, but it doesn't look like I have to now. But let's talk about the main star of the show today, which is the cameras. The ultra-wide lens and the telephoto lens still gets that 12 megapixel sensor. We don't see any resolution bump there, but they do let in more light. I don't have a 13 Pro to test that out, so I don't know how much light it lets in. However, from the videos I've seen online, I think it lets in a really decent amount of light. Then from the times where I've used it in low light conditions, the ultra, I love using that ultra wide lens. It looks incredible in regular daylight. It looks very nice in low light as well. The main sensor though, the main camera gets a new 48 megapixel new sensor, and that 48 megapixel, it really makes a difference. If you're shooting in Apple Pro RAW, which is how you utilize the entire 48 megapixels, you really see that sharpness compared to the 12 megapixel camera. But if you're not shooting in Pro RAW, it crops that image down to a 12 megapixel. Basically, it takes that 48 megapixel sensor and compresses it into 12 megapixels. It's still very sharp. It's very nice if you're just posting on social media, and you get a very nice natural background blur. I'm going to put out some sample images right now just to show you what the natural background blur looks like. Minimum focusing distance is a little bit of a problem. I realize that coming from an iPhone 10, because the iPhone 10 I can get very close and I can still get that natural background blur. However, with the iPhone 14 Pro, I realize if I get too close to a subject, it suggests that you switch to the macro mode using the ultra wide lens. It usually does it automatically. There's a toggle in your camera settings so you can turn it off, so you can switch it manually so it doesn't just switch over automatically. But the natural background blur, when you get it right, when it's in focus, it looks so nice. It looks like it was taking on a mirrorless camera. It looks like it was taking on my camera with a 1.8 lens or something. But like I mentioned earlier, in Apple Pro RAW, you get that full 48 megapixels. I did a test, or I did like a camera test on my Instagram a couple days ago, and comparing a couple shots that I took with the new sensor on this iPhone comparing to the camera that I'm recording this video on. The new sensor also gets that 24mm focal length instead of the 26mm focal length, so it's comparable to the focal length that I have on my camera right now, both at 24mm. And I took a couple shots at 24 and at 77mm. I'm going to put those pictures up on the screen right now. Let me know if you're able to see which ones are shot with the iPhone and which ones are not. I'll put up the results along with this video as well. Pretty crazy, right? That came from a smartphone. Like, for me, even when I had to put all these images together, I had to double check to make sure that I'm putting up the right images. I'm not mixing up the picture I took from my Canon RP with the images I took from the 14 Pro. And it just shows that smartphone photography has come a long way since what it was before, when you're able to clearly distinguish the difference. Obviously, there's still a difference between professional cameras and smartphone photography. That full frame sensor you get on full frame cameras, they're not just a joke. They're not just there to scam you out of more money. You don't pay $3,000 for a camera and just get the same quality as a smartphone. There are obviously differences, but the fact that at certain focal length, at certain environments, certain scenarios where the differences are very minimal, just blows my mind. One complaint I have about the iPhone 14's camera is that Apple adds like a layer of sharpening into their post-processing, which it didn't do when I had the iPhone 10, or they still don't have that on the iPhone 10. I think the 13 and the 12 was when they started adding that sharpening. The 14 Pro is just so much more apparent. That's the only problem I had with it. It makes things look a little bit unnatural, especially the bokeh in the background. Hopefully it's just a software fix, but overall, yeah, look, I love this phone. I think it'll stick with me for the next 45 years, just like my iPhone 10 did. I'm not like other YouTubers who have a closet full of smartphones that you can switch out of and then review one phone for 2 weeks and then switch to the next phone. This is gonna be my daily driver for the next 4 or 5 years, for however long it may be, until I think it's time for me to get an upgrade. But yeah, this phone right now is great. My friends keep telling me I spend more money just to buy another camera, and honestly, with how much I'm talking about the camera, with how much I use the camera on this phone, yeah, it's a very good and powerful camera right in your pocket. That's it from me. See you in the next one. Peace out. And another new feature, I think, yeah, this is a new thing that was on this iPhone. Oh shoot. Both still have the 12 megapixel light. this phone is going to be moving throughout the entire time because I either forgot to turn on my focus mode or my mom's calling me. So that phone, if it moves, that's why.